Welcome, everybody, to tonight's Mathewson-Plank Chapter's virtual meeting. We have, I think, an excellent program for you this evening. But before we get started, I just have one announcement. Um, the next Mathewson-Plank virtual book club meeting is going to be on Saturday, November 15th at 10 a.m. And it's going to be Paul D. White is going to be talking about his book, Cooperstown's Backdoor, A History of Negro Leaguers in the Baseball Hall of Fame. And the meeting will be moderated by um, Ted Noor, who is a Negro League historian. He's also a chapter member. And it's not just about the Negro Leaguers that are already in the Hall of Fame, but how they had a tough time getting there in the first place and how they're going to improve it in the future, possibly for a better representation of the Negro Leagues. So that'll be Saturday the 15th at 10 a.m. And that's the only announcement I really have. Um, with that, I'm going to introduce Mike Walsh. Mike is a member of the Philly chapter, the Connie Mac Dick Allen chapter, and he's going to take us back to a Phillies baseball in the mid 1960s, and he's going to talk about not just players there, but trades that were made prior to the game he's going to talk about, or prior to the season he's going to talk about, and
Right.
also the trades that were made after that season and how they affected the Phillies for years to come. And I think you're going to hear some names come up that a lot of you will remember, but I think a lot of you are going to hear names that you've long forgot about, and maybe some new ones. So with that, Mike, why don't you take us back to 21st and Lehigh one more time?
All right. Thank you, Frank. When Frank and I first talked about doing this presentation, Frank mentioned this date, and there were no games, playoff games, or anything planned for this night. And we knew the World Series was going to be starting tomorrow night. And I don't know what Frank was thinking, but I was thinking, hey, maybe the Phillies will be in the World Series. So be kind of fun to have a historical presentation about the Phillies one night before the Phillies were in the World Series. Well, unfortunately, that didn't happen. So here we are. We'll talk about the Phillies in 1966, and the Phillies season ended. I guess we could say tragically, but you'll see the titles on this first slide. It says "Original Wheeze Kids," "The Mythical Willie Mays Triple," "A Matinee Hero," and some bored Cub Scouts. Those titles will all make sense to you within a few minutes. So, as you can see from the slide, I'm talking about this game on Saturday afternoon, July 16th, 1966. So you probably are wondering, why did I pick out this game? Well, this was a game that I had gone to. But until a year or two ago, before I started researching this game, I didn't know the date of the game. I didn't know who won the game. I only remembered a couple of things. I went to the game with some Cub Scouts. So somebody's mother or father drove us down there in a station wagon. I grew up near Schwenksville, Pennsylvania, which is about an hour outside the city, sort of north of the city. I remembered it was on a weekend afternoon in the mid 60s. I mean, they wouldn't have taken us out of school to go to a Phillies game, right? So I knew it was on a weekend afternoon. I knew it was against the Giants, and I knew it went many extra innings. Because one thing I remembered is we had 6 or 7 Cub Scouts, and most of us by the 6th or 7th inning weren't paying attention anymore and really just wanted to go home. So we were kind of miserable. And I remembered that Willie Mays hit a triple. That's the one thing I remembered very specifically. I remembered Willie Mays sliding into third base, and I knew we were sitting on the third base side of the stadium because Mays slid toward us, and it was a very close play at third base. And every once in a while, I'd run into another baseball fan somewhere, and I'd tell him, "Hey, I saw Willie Mays hit a triple at Connie Mack Stadium," and then I was thinking a couple of years ago, "Oh, I think I'll post something on Facebook about this," but I didn't know the game or even the date or anything. So somebody told me, "Oh, you can go on Baseball Reference, you can probably figure it out." So that's what I did, and I was able to figure it out. Baseball Reference has screens that are lists of the entire schedule for a team for a season. So I looked through these pages for a few of the years in the mid 60s, and there was only one game that fit this description, and that was Saturday, July 16th. And you see here, if it went extra innings, they put a number here in this column, and you see a 15 right there. So this was the only game in the mid 60s where the Giants were in a weekend afternoon game in Philadelphia that went extra innings. So I knew this had to be the game. And if I click the box score link, it pulls up the box score, and it'll Baseball Reference will tell you the time of the game, which was an afternoon game. So that's how I identified the game, first of all. And one thing you'll notice here is that it says Sunday, July 10th, and then the next game below there is Thursday, July 14th, when this San Francisco series starts against the Phillies, right? 14th, 15th, and 16th. Well, why are there 3 days off in the middle of July? Well, one obvious reason, it's the All-Star game. So, the All-Star game that year was on July 12th in St. Louis. The top of my screen is I can't see the very top of my screen, so I don't get the date. Oh, okay. So I think it started at like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. It supposedly was 103 degrees at game time. On the field during the game, I think I read somewhere that it was as high as 113 degrees, and that approximately 150 people were carried out of the stadium for fainting or heat stroke or something like this. But they played the game anyway. And there were 6 Giants in that All-Star game. The Giants were doing very well that season, by the way, and were in first place. So they got 6 guys into the game. Mays and McCovey, of course, and Juan Marichal, of course, and Gaylord Perry. But they also got their catcher, Tom Holler. And what you see within the parentheses here, it just indicates what they did in the game. Like Mays went 1 for 4, McCovey went 0 for 3. Tom Holler was a catcher, did not play. And Jim Ray Hart, who was the Giants' normal third baseman, went 0 for 1 as a pinch hitter. And you can see Marichal went 3 innings and Gaylord Perry went 2 innings for the win. And the Phillies had Dick Allen and Jim Bunning in the game. And by the way, I note here that the asterisk next to some of these names indicates that these guys are future Hall of Famers. So there were 6 future Hall of Famers in this series in Philadelphia. 4 for the Giants and 2 for the Phillies. And I don't think I'm missing anybody else, but those are 6 that I know of. And by the way, this All-Star game, Denny McLain and Sandy Koufax were the starters, and the National League won 2-1 in 10 innings when Maury Wills singled home Tim McCarver for the winning run. So, and Gaylord Perry pitched the last 2 innings for the win. So, anyway. Oh, I spelled McLean wrong. Oh, thank you, Jeff. I have to fix that. Okay, at the All-Star break, by the way, the Phillies were in 4th place, 7 games back. And here are the standings you can see. And and the Giants were in first, 1 up on the Pirates. You see the Dodgers back here, 5 games back. They're lurking. One funny thing about this that I noticed is the Giants had scored 370 runs at that point. The Phillies had scored 375 runs. So even the Phillies were 7 games behind the Giants, but the Phillies had scored more runs, and they had given up fewer runs, you can see. The Giants had given up 324. The Phillies had only given up 321. So apparently the Giants were like really efficient in their games. They were winning games by just a couple of runs, and the Phillies were losing some very close games. I assume I'd have to go back and look at their schedules, but it's kind of odd to see something like that. Or the run differential for the Phillies is actually, 15 runs higher than it is for the Giants. But that's how it goes, I suppose. Okay, let's talk about Willie Mays a little bit more here before we get started on the game. He was 35 in 1966. 288 batting average that year, 37 home runs, 103 RBIs. Pretty decent for Willie Mays, like a standard Willie Mays season. Although in 65, he was the MVP with 52 home runs and 317 and 112 RBIs. His other MVP year was 1954. Mays also won a Gold Glove every year from 57 through 68. And he was an all-star every year from 54 through 72. Just amazing. He retired in 73 with the Mets at 42 years old. Now, when I first started researching this, and I knew I wanted to write about this game, I tried to find a photo of Mays sliding into third base during this game. Well, I wasn't able to find it. But I did find a couple of photos of Mays sliding into base at Connie Mack Stadium. This game right here, you see, this slide right here in this cool photo. And you see that's a watermark from whatever photo service I sort of got the photo from. But I think this is a really cool photo. You know, you have the third baseman. There's Mays. He's safe on this play. You know, he's past third base, so he slid in safely before the tag. And there's the umpire getting in there really close to get the call right. And here's this is an AP photo. Here's the caption: Willie Mays sliding into third base in the fourth inning of a game in Philadelphia on May 7th, 1961. Beating throw from Phillies center fielder Bobby Del Greco to third baseman Bob Sadowski. Giants defeated the Phillies 7-0. Oh boy. In 61, the Phillies were really, really horrible. One of the worst years ever. They went 47-107. So, you know, they lost a lot of games, 107 games that year. Ouch. I hardly ever have heard of Bobby Del Greco and Bob Sadowski. I don't think they were with the Phillies for very long. At any rate, I found another photo of Mays sliding into, here he is sliding into second base. This is 1964, and that's Cookie Rojas. Another cool photo, you see the dust coming up here, the umpire's running over. You can see, you know, it looks like, you know, his clothing is looking a little odd because he's running. And just a fairly close play, although he's out on this play. This is from June 1, 1964. He's out in a cloud of dust here, as this is the caption that was on the photo, as he tried to stretch a hit to left into a double in the eighth inning. Wes Covington threw to Philadelphia's second baseman, Cookie Rojas, for the out. One of the brighter moments for the home team as they lost to the Giants 4-2. June 1, 1964. Now, you probably know that the Phillies in 1964 had a very good team. They won a lot of games, and they were in first place almost the entire season, and then really had one of the worst chokes in Major League history when they lost. They were up 6.5 with two weeks to play, and they ended up losing the pennant to the Cardinals. So that's a really horrible memory for the Phillies, and that affects the Phillies in 66 a great deal. I'll talk to you about that more. And by the way, this is called the hook slide, and you see what he's doing. He's sliding wide. He's sliding a couple feet to the right with his legs, and then trying to reach back with his hand on the base. Very common sliding technique. You still see it in baseball. And the idea is that the second baseman or shortstop or whoever would try to, his hand would naturally go to tag the feet of the person sliding, and the hand could sneak in there behind. But he wasn't successful in this case. But that is a standard slide. You still see it today. You still see the hook slide. And by the way, here's a slide I think we could call a hook slide that was just this last year. With the Phillies. I put this up here just because it's a famous play that happened. I think it was in, sorry about that. I think it happened in July. You see Castellanos and Real Muto scoring against the Giants, and they're sliding wide and reaching back with their hand. This was famous because they were like 3 feet. Real Muto was like 3 feet behind Castellanos. I know this is a little digression, but this is just a fun moment from a year that ended in disappointment. And you see they both slid wide, and they reached back with their hand to touch the plate. Now, the reason they did that here is simply to give the catcher less to tag, right? They kept their bodies far away from the catcher and slid with their hands, so that he didn't have as much to tag, just to avoid the tag a little bit. But if you're not familiar with that play, go back and look at the highlights You can find highlights on YouTube for this about this particular slide. It was really cool, really unusual, really neat. But at any rate, so let's get to the Phillies, to this series. And the first game was on July 14th. And Larry Jackson threw a complete game shutout. And the Phillies won 5-0. He pitched against Gaylord Perry, started for the Giants. And the Phillies knocked him out in the fourth inning. What was weird is Perry had pitched on July 9th, July 12th in the All-Star game, and now here he is on the 14th, and in like a span of 5 days, he's pitching 3 times. It's like, gee, can't you give the guy a little bit of a rest? But by the way, Perry is fourth in MLB in innings pitched back to 1911. That's as far as our database goes. So at any rate, at this point, with the Giants losing, they were now tied with the Pirates. They started in the All-Star break, they were up by 1 game on the Pirates. Now they were tied with the Pirates. So Larry Jackson was a great pitcher. He never made it to the Hall of Fame, but he was really good. He threw 5 complete game shutouts for the Phillies in '66. And the Phillies just acquired him on April 21st, 1966. This is an infamous trade that if you're a Phillies fan, you've probably heard about many times, where they got from the Cubs, on April 21st, they got Larry Jackson and Bob Buell, 2 very old pitchers. I mean, Buell is 37. They're trading for a 37-year-old pitcher. Oh my God. They sent to the Cubs 3 guys in their 20s. Ferguson Jenkins, who you all know probably is a future Hall of Famer. You're not supposed to trade future Hall of Famers. John Herenstein was kind of a throw-in on the trade. He was a backup. And Adolfo Phillips, who was projected to be, a starting outfielder. And I believe Phillips was the main reason that the Cubs made this trade, but it turned out Ferguson Jenkins, who I believe was at AAA at the time of the trade, by the way, turned out Ferguson Jenkins, was the real catch in this trade. So that's a sad moment in Phillies history on that trade. And by the way, you see, this was right after the season started. Back then, the seasons would start in mid-April, although they were playing 162 games that season. So this was only like a week into the season when this trade happened. This infamous, horrible, sad trade. Okay, Friday, July 15th. Juan Marichal pitches a complete game and the Giants win 8-1. That put Marichal at 15-4. Bunning took the loss. So this was a marquee matchup. I don't know if this was on national television, but it should have been. Marichal versus Bunning, Bunning dropped to 9-6. He gave up a home run to Mays, his 21st of the season, and his 526th home run. Giants were back in first after this game. So, and look at this photo. I mean, this is just amazing of Juan Marichal. I mean, look at that leg kick. And look how low the ball is in his hand. Just amazing. Like, people do not pitch that way anymore. But Juan Marichal is amazing. Okay. Okay, so here's the lineup for this game. This is the Saturday game. This would have been the rubber match of the series. The Giants had Ray Sadecki going. So he was a left-hander. So the Phillies started a bunch of right-handers. Cookie Rojas, Callison, which left-hander, I think. Dick Grote, Dick Allen, Harvey Kuhn, right-hander, was playing in left field. He played part-time player for the Phillies that year. Bill White, who was left-hander. Tony Taylor, Bob Uecker start, who was a right-handed catcher. And Bob Buell was the pitcher for the Phillies, that 37-year-old we had just gotten. This I guess would have been his 2nd or 3rd game with the team. Oh, I'm sorry. No, he had been playing since April. That's wrong. Oh, and I listed a couple subs down here. Tony Gonzalez, Clay Dalrymple, and Phil Linz came into the game later in the game, so I just wanted to list them here. They played a very important role in this particular game. And you see the Giants lineup. Schroeder, Jim Davenport was playing third. He was like a pretty good hitting utility infielder. He could play a number of positions, but he started in third that day. Mays, McCovey, Jim Ray Hart, their all-star third baseman who was playing left field that day. This is rather important in the game. Jesus Alou, Tom Holler, Tito Fuentes, and Ray Sadecki, the starting pitcher. Okay. And Hal Lanier came in a little later, utility infielder. Let's see here. Oh, now, okay, so you see Grote and Bill White and Bob Uecker. So the Phillies acquired those three guys from the Cardinals back in October 65. After the 65 season was over, they made this other trade, again, for older players. You look at their ages there, and you look at the players they traded, 23, 28, 25, whereas Dick Grote was 35. Uecker and White were in their 30s. So this was another trade where they're getting older. It was kind of surprising. Now, Alex Johnson was a player who had a lot of promise, ended up the AL batting champion in 1970. But, the Phillies, they were, it was like, what are the Phillies doing? Why are they making these trades? Now, this was considered a good trade for the Phillies at the time because Bill White became the starting first baseman. Uecker played like 70-some games for the Phillies in 66. And Dick Grote played a lot of shortstop for the Phillies that season because Bobby Wine, their normal starting shortstop, was out for the season. Or not the season, excuse me. He was out most of the season and only played 30 games or something with some sort of back problem. So luckily they got Grote. I think when they originally traded for Grote, they were thinking he and Wine would split duties at shortstop, but Grote ended up playing a lot more than probably he or anybody else anticipated. So let's look at, since we're talking about those trades, let's look at a few of the other moves the Phillies made prior to the 66 season. November 29th, 65, they traded Ruben Amaro for Phil Linz. And you see their ages. They're a couple of utility infielders. This didn't seem to have a big impact on the team. They traded Jack Baldsham to the Baltimore Orioles for Darrell Knowles and Jackie Brandt. Now, this turned out to be a good trade for the Phillies. Jack Baldsham didn't do that much for the Orioles. I think they turned around and traded him again fairly quickly. But Darrell Knowles was very good for the Phillies in 66. In fact, he was like their mainstay of their bullpen and pitched like in close to 70 games, much more than anyone else. And Jackie Brandt was a part-time outfielder for the Phillies that year. They got Doug Clemens for Wes Covington. Wes Covington was 34 at the time, and he did not do much for Chicago. He was pretty much at the end of his career. Doug Clemens was the main pinch hitter for the Phillies for the next few seasons. Didn't break into the starting lineup, but by the way, I recently spoke to Doug Clemens. He doesn't remember much about this game or even the 66 season, it seems. But he lives in Pennsylvania. He's a real nice guy, and I got to speak with him recently. So he was a part-time outfielder and pinch hitter. And they got Roger Craig. On April 11th, they picked up Roger Craig. Now, this is right before the season starts, so he must have been a final cut by the Reds. And he was signed by the Phillies just before the start of the season on April 13th. Now, the reason they did this is because the Phillies had a few younger players who had been in their bullpen in 65 and looked pretty good, and they were counting on them to help with their bullpen. Balsham to Reds as part of the Frank Robinson deal. Okay, yes, absolutely. So these younger guys, these minor league guys, ended up in getting hurt in the preseason and didn't make the team. They were hurt, and then they played when they one of them had surgery or something. I can't remember their names, but they ended up starting the season once they recovered from in the minor leagues and didn't even do that well in the minor leagues in 60. So they were short of relief pitchers. So they signed Roger Craig, 37, another, older guy. They got rid of Wes Covington, who was older and got a little younger with this trade. But, with Brandt and Craig, this is two more guys in their 30s. The team is getting older. More moves. April 23rd, a week into the season, they picked up Harvey Kuhn from the purchase from the Chicago Cubs. I guess the Cubs didn't need him since they picked up Adolfo Phillips and Harvey, a great player, but was at the end of his career. So they got him just for some money. And then on the 10th, they picked up Terry Fox, a 30-year-old relief pitcher from the Tigers. And again, adding players in their 30s. By the way, the odd thing is they added 5 players from the 64 Cardinals. These 5 guys were all with the Cardinals in 64. And the Cardinals were the team that, won the pennant from them and went on to win the World Series. And so I was always surprised to see that. Now, Clemens was traded from the Cardinals, I think, to the Cubs in like June of 64. So he wasn't with the Cardinals the entire season. But at any rate, I was surprised that they picked up all these players from the Cardinals because it would just seem to remind everyone of the horrible thing that happened in 64. But that's what they did. So seems odd to me, but that's how it went. Now, if we look at the players they traded and the players they added, you'll notice look at these guys, look at the ages of these guys. This seemed really, and the guys that they traded were mostly in their 20s. This seems really jumped out at me. And there's like 12 players here. The roster's only 25, so they replaced like half of their roster between the 65 and 66 seasons. Which never seems like a good sign to me. Teams that are good, they have continuity. They have good players, good coaches, good front office, and they keep those guys, and maybe they make some changes around the edges, but they don't replace half their team in the offseason. Or it just seems amazing to me that this much upheaval is never good for a team, in my opinion. Okay, now, as I said, the title was the opposite of the process. And the reason I say that is if you think of the process, most of you probably know, it's associated with Sam Hinkie and the Sixers starting in 2013, where he got rid of all these older players or veterans so that he could lose now, tanking, and build for the future through the draft. So the process was get young and lose now. Whereas the Phillies in 66 were trading younger players for over-the-hill but still competent veterans. So get old and win now and risk the future. I mean, really, they were totally giving up on their future to try to win now. So 13 members of the 25-man roster were over 30 years old. So after coming close in 64, almost winning that pennant, but crashing at the end, in 65, they took a step back and ended up in 6th place. Even though they were 9 games over 500, they were still in 6th place, 11 and a half games back. So it seemed like 66 might be the last chance for this group of Phillies. And they had a good core with Bunning and Short and, Richie Allen and Tony Taylor and Tony Gonzalez and Cookie Rojas and Johnny Callison. Clay Dalrymple. They had a good they had a good team, but they basically just changed everybody. And it seemed like they got these veterans because the vets wouldn't fold in September like the Phillies in 64 had. So it seemed like the roster for this 66 team was totally in response to 64. And Quinn and Mauch, it just seemed like they were panicking. It just seemed like they felt this is our last chance. We have to go all in or else we could lose our jobs. At least that's how I'm interpreting it. That's the way it seemed to me. And it wasn't just me. There were other people, other writers who were mentioning the same thing. Here's an article. Here's some things that Gene Mauch said in an article Bill Conlin wrote for the Philadelphia Daily News on September 30, 1966. He's quoting Gene Mauch as saying in July, he's saying, "We'll win it. I know we'll win it." So we had this conversation with Conlin about the Phillies' chances back in July, when this game took place, by the way. He was telling Conlin that the Dodgers lacked power and were getting subpar season from Don Drysdale, that the Giants had no pitching after Juan Marichal and Gaylord Perry, and a defense that was strong only in center field. We know who that was, Willie Mays. And Mauch was quoted as saying, "There's no way the Pirates can win it with Veal and Fryman pitching in tough games in the final month." And then he mentioned Cincinnati lost their collective faith after the criminal stupidity that sent Frank Robinson to Baltimore. By the way, we'll mention Baltimore a couple times during this presentation. But so this is a conversation he had with Mock, the manager, of course, back in July about why the Phillies will win the pennant. So he had a lot of faith in this team. Now, this is what Conlon wrote. This is what Mock had said at the time. It's the most professional team I've ever managed. Men who have been here before. So he's talking about those aging veterans, right? And you see here, this is something that Conlon wrote. Mock reasoned that Jackson and Buell would win 25 to 30 games between them. He called his starting alignment of Jim Bunning, Chris Short, Jackson, Buell, and Culp as strong and experienced as any in the league. He knew the team would score more runs. How was any right-hander going to wade through a gauntlet of Rojas, Grote, Callison, Allen, White, Gonzalez, and Clay Dalrymple? And Brandt, Euchre, and veteran Harvey Kuhn would put more pressure on left-handers. But Conlon called the roster strategy a defense mechanism to ensure against collapse. So, it just seemed like it was a total reaction to the collapse in '64. Now, the other thing that happened was one of the writers in Philadelphia, Stan Hochman, started referring to the Phillies as the Wheeze kids. And this is the first instance that I have been able to find of the Wheeze kids in April. This appeared in April 26 in '66, referring to the age of the team. And of course, it's a little joke on the phrase the Whiz kids, which was the nickname of the 19 Phillies 50s, who were very young, right? And so, if they're very old, then we'll call them the Wheeze kids, because that's like a little bit of a joke. Now, the next day, Hochman wrote a column, and he talked about this quite a bit. He quotes Bill DeWitt, who is the owner of Cincinnati, apparently. He says the Phillies appear to be trying to gather the oldest team in baseball. And Hochman writes, what the Phillies appear to be doing is trying to win a pennant with a dynasty almost as old as the Ming dynasty. The Wheeze kids creak back into action here tonight against the Mets. So, the jokes just write themselves with these columnists when the team is old. And DeWitt said out loud what everyone has been thinking, that the Phillies are making a no-holds-barred bid for a pennant in '66 and never mind about the future. So, yeah, it apparently is pretty obvious that the Phillies were pretty desperate, and to do this, change that much about the roster is pretty wild. Another columnist at the Daily News wrote, the laughter at Connie Mack will turn to whimpers if all the ancients the Phillies are collecting turn out to be Don Hoaks. Don Hoak, apparently, I guess he was a third baseman who the Phillies had picked up in like '62 or '63 and who hadn't done too well. With 6 pitchers in their mid to late 30s and 3 regulars in their early to mid 30s, the Phillies needed geriatrician instead of a trainer. Ha, ha, ha. By turning Connie Mack into a rest home, there's another joke, it is evident that Quinn and Mock have gone just about as far as they can to bring a pennant to town. If this doesn't do it, it's Geritol for the Phillies and Hemlock for management. Like I said, the jokes just write themselves. Okay, just a little digression here about the name Wheeze Kids. Hochman used the name again in 1983 for the Phillies. The Phillies in 1983 made it to the World Series against Baltimore. And the Phillies at the time, they had a lot of aging players, but they made a run for the World Series. They even had Pete Rose, Joe Morgan, and Tony Perez on the team, guys from the Big Red Machine. Here are the list of the Phillies who were in their 30s at the time of '83. It's a lot of guys in their 30s. The nickname stuck with the '83 Phillies because it got a lot of national attention. When a team makes the World Series, every newspaper in the country writes articles about the team, and they all mention their age, and many of them mentioned this Wheeze kid's nickname. And they lost to the Orioles. By the way, the '83 Phillies lost to the Orioles in 5 games. They won the first game of the series and then lost the other 4. And the '83 Phillies were actually older on average than the '66 team, but the 66 Phillies were the original Wheeze kids. Okay, so let's get back to this game. The starters for Saturday, July 16, 1966, Bob Buell, right-hander, 37 years old, and the Giants' Ray Sadecki, 25 years old. These are two pitchers who are really kind of similar in a lot of ways, despite their ages. They both had long careers in the majors. They didn't have good seasons that particular year. You can see Buell went 6 for 8 with a 4.77 ERA, and Sadecki went 5 for 8 with a 4.80 ERA. But they both pitched. They both had a long successful career. Sadecki was in the majors for 18 years. You just can't be in the majors that long unless you're really good. And had I don't know, 1,600 strikeouts. They each won close to 130, 140 games, pitched 1,600 innings or something. Just amazing. These are great pitchers. They might have been the third starter on teams, but these are the kind of guys you need on a teams to win. These are innings eaters. They keep you in the game. And they both had career ERAs closer to 3, by the way, than their 66 ERAs. By the way, Sadecki had been traded for Orlando Cepeda that same year. Another future Hall of Famer being traded. It's kind of crazy. But it actually worked out for both teams. I mean, and Sadecki was with the Giants for a number of years, and he was with other teams. But Sadecki turned out to, have a long career, as I said. But, you get traded for a Hall of Famer, and that kind of follows you for your entire career. And Sadecki had problems with the Giants that year. But, okay. More information about this game, 1:37 start time. Paid attendance was close to 15,000. And now I would see this number in a few box scores that I looked at, but I knew that wasn't right because when I was at that game, I remembered it being really crowded. And then I found that after looking at a few articles, one of them mentioned that there were actually over 31,000 people in the stadium that day because they had given out, it was a promotion, free tickets for kids and women. So apparently that's how the Cub Scouts went. Our Cub Scout leader managed to grab a bunch of tickets. The capacity for Connie Mack Stadium was 33,600. And by the way, the weather that day was 82 degrees. Excuse me. And partly cloudy at game time. A humidity at 30%. Absolutely perfect baseball weather. I was there. I was in the sun. I don't remember it being really hot. Excuse me. So, just a perfect game for baseball. Both teams, oddly, had double headers the next day. The Dodgers were coming into Philadelphia for a doubleheader, and the Giants were going to be at Pittsburgh for a doubleheader. So the Giants had to travel to Pittsburgh, so good to have an afternoon game so they could get there that evening. Okay, the second inning, no scoring in the first inning. Second inning, this happened. And you see this play. This is Richie Allen playing third base with his glove on the arm of Jim Ray Hart. And Hart is out. You see he's tagging Hart's arm, and you can see his foot is still up. Hart's front foot is up. It's not down on the base, so he's clearly out. Now, he had doubled to start the inning, and he advanced to third on an error by Cookie Rojas, who was playing center field that day. Rojas will have another error later that'll figure prominently in this game. But the caption reads, Richie Allen, Phillies third baseman, puts tag on arm of Jim Ray Hart, San Francisco Giants, to complete a double play after pitcher Bob Buell made a leaping grab of a ball hit by catcher Tom Holler. So Buell was still limber enough, even at age 37, to catch that line drive and throw quickly to third to get a double play. Now, this photo appeared all over the country. This was the photo that the AP sent out to thousands of newspapers across the country. And if they published a photo about the game with the AP story, this was the photo they published. And oddly, this was not really a crucial play in the game. There are many, many more important plays than this. But this is how the AP worked, I guess. The photo editor looked at the photos and picked one out, and that's the photo that went out with the story. So this article, this photo appeared with a gazillion small newspapers. I know this because I looked at a lot of articles in small newspapers. Now, by the way, I mentioned women and kids got in for free, and there's a woman right there, I believe. That looks like that could be my grandmother. I'm sure it's not, but it could. I think that's a woman. It looks like a woman. She looks like she's screaming. That looks like a woman. So there's a lot of women up here. And you can see how crowded it is, which is kind of cool. Two Phillies trying to reach the pennant, Giants in first place, a Saturday afternoon game. And of course, they gave out 15, 16,000 free tickets. So a lot of people there. And by the way, you'll notice this photo is really poor quality. And what happened is, the photo was, I'm sure, a very good, well shot photo when on film. But then when it's in a newspaper, it degrades, right? So it's not as good in the newspaper on the newsprint. And what happened in the 70s and in the 60s, I assume, all these newspapers were put on microfiche. So this photo is a scan from some microfiche, because what happened was, 50 years later, those photos are no longer available, at least as far as I know. I couldn't find the photos. I wrote to the AP and asked, and I got no reply. So microfiche, it's the third generation of the photo, and microfiche, if you look at the photo in microfiche, they don't look good. You can see there's all this high contrast. A lot of the detail is lost, but this is what we have left, sadly, because newspapers were taking photos on film at the time, and they didn't have enough money to really store the photos properly, to store the negatives. So, millions of photos from baseball games and other things have been lost from back then. For instance, the Philadelphia Bulletin went out of business, I think, in the early 80s or so, and they literally threw out their photo archive. They closed down because they didn't have any money left. So they, of course, didn't have enough money to maintain like some sort of warehouse, temperature controlled warehouse where these photos would last. So they threw it out. Now, I know Temple University has a couple thousand photos from the Bulletin's photo archive, but that's a drop in the bucket. That's a tiny amount compared to the number of photos that were taken. So it's kind of sad, but a lot of those photos are gone. Now, okay, so no score to the top of the fourth when Jim Davenport, the starting third baseman for the Giants, hits a home run off the upper deck facing in left center. Cool. He really got a hold of that one. Then Mays doubled. He didn't triple here. And McCovey drove him in. So the Giants were leading 2-0. The bottom of the fourth, Grote walks. Allen singles. Grote goes to third, and Kuhn flies to left. Grote tags and scores. Giants are up 2-1. This is really kind of cool because this is like Gene Mauch baseball. He liked small ball, right? And so they got one hit, a single, and yet they still got a run out of it. That's exactly the kind of baseball that Gene Mauch wanted to play. And Grote was involved and Kuhn was involved. Those were two guys he had brought in. They were supposed to be able to do these kinds of things. They weren't supposed to mess up like the younger guys, right? At least that's how Mauch felt. And that's what they did. So they got that run. Then in the fifth inning, Euchre solo home run to left, his last homer of the season. The score is now 2-2. This, by the way, here's Euchre and Clay Dalrymple. So they shared catching duties. There they are with a couple catcher's mitts. And Euchre, he had a kind of a good sized schnoz there. There's his schnoz catching the sunlight. And this was Euchre's best season, 66, by the way. He played in 78 games, 237 plate appearances, 43 hits, 7 home runs, 30 RBIs. He only had 14 home runs in his entire career. His career, he only had a 5-year career, 200 batting average. And, he got a lot of mileage out of that 200 batting average with jokes throughout his career by comparing himself to really good hitters. And just a note here that Euchre actually had 2 home runs off of Sadecki in 66. I believe Sadecki is the only pitcher who ever gave up 2 home runs to Euchre. So at any rate, now here we have something. Let's see if this will play.
True that you gave the general manager, John Quinn, an ultimatum? Play me or trade me?
I told him, play me, trade me, or I'll quit. The Phillies trade, Bob. All over town, people are incredulous. Why would they do it?
We finally found somebody that was taking off our hands. We begged and we pleaded. We threatened people. We bribed them. And we finally got somebody to take him off our hands. And it helped us. It helped us a lot.
The people in Philadelphia were vehement. The Schuylkill River dried up. It was unbelievable. Bob Uecker Day was held on a day off. It was unbelievable. I'll never forget it. It was like myself and the ground crew guys standing at home plate, eating hard-boiled eggs and drinking beer and stuff. It was a tremendous. I don't like to talk about that stuff because it kind of gets me. That was a beautiful day. Bob Uecker Day.
Okay, Bob Uecker Day, on an off day, eating hard-boiled eggs at home plate. Uecker's great. Funny guy. And that, by the way, that trade they were talking about, that took place in 67, by the way. It's cool they got Whitey Ashburn in there to joke about Uecker as well. So, but yeah, he apparently did demand to play. I guess Mock wasn't playing him in 67, and Uecker wasn't happy about it. Okay. Okay, top of the sixth. Here we go. This is the important thing. Mays singles off of Buell. The ball goes through the legs of Cookie Rojas in center field. Rojas' second error of the day. Mays slides into third ahead of the throw, so it was a two-base error. That's what I saw. And that's what I was telling people. I had seen Willie Mays hit a triple, and he hadn't. I had seen him hit a single, but he got to third, and he slid into third. So as a little kid, I was assuming he hit a triple, but he didn't. So at any rate, Willie Mays is still great, so no big deal. But I'm not going to be bragging that I saw Willie Mays hit a triple anymore. So that's what you find out. But at any rate, then McCovey singles and Mays scored. Oh, there you go. So by the way, if Cookie Rojas had not made that error, we would not be here today, right? So at any rate, then Hart reaches on an error by White, the first baseman, and McCovey's on second. Then Holler singles. And here's what the Inquirer wrote. McCovey scored on a hit, and when the throw skipped through Uecker for an error, Hart also came home for an unearned run. So 3 errors in the inning for the Phillies. They're like the Keystone Cops out there throwing the ball all over the place. The ball's going through their legs all the way back to the fence. So at any rate, at this point, the Giants are leading 5-2. And Uecker, by the way, the whole reason he was in the league was not for his hitting. It was for his defense. He was supposedly a good defensive catcher, and yet, whatever. God. Okay. So, by the way, there's Cookie Rojas with these gloves. I thought this photo was funny in context because, he was having a little trouble with the glove that day. That error was his second error of the day. We're only in the 6th inning. He already has 2 errors. But this caption says he played 7 positions in 64, failing only to pitch and play first base. I'm surprised he didn't play first base. I mean, come on. I'm sure he could have played first base. But this is funny. There's 7 photos there. Seven gloves you'll see for the 7 positions. So there's 2 for him. So that means there's another 5. That means there's 3 people standing behind him to get those gloves out there in this photo. And yet you can't see any sign of those people. You can't see the edge of anyone's body or anything. So it's a very well put together photo. It looks like it's in spring training. That looks like a spring training type fence. So Cookie wasn't throwing much leather this day on July 16th, 1966. But he was playing out of position. He really was their second baseman. That was his best position. And Mock liked guys who could play all over the place. And, He liked flexibility. He liked to move guys around. But it didn't work out this particular day. By the way, Cookie Rojas had a really good season. I think he hit like 300 that year and came in like 10th on batting average, top batting average in the National League. So really good player, despite his troubles that day. Okay, bottom of the 6th. Kuhn singles, Bill White homers for his 16th of the season. And Sadecki's replaced by Lindy McDaniel. Giants are now leading 5-4. No runs are scored in the 7th or 8th by either team. And Frank Lindsay replaces McDaniel for San Francisco in the 8th with 2 outs. Okay, so now we're going to the 9th. Clay Dalrymple replaces Euchre at catcher. Tony Gonzalez replaces Rojas in center field. Rojas replaces Tony Taylor at second. And Phil Linz replaces Grote at shortstop. Now, Lindsay was a right-hander, so they put Dalrymple and Gonzalez were left-handed hitters. So I guess that's why they made those changes. And we had Darryl Knowles was now pitching, and he sets down the Giants in order in the top of the 9th. Okay, bottom of the 9th. Phillies are losing 5-4. Tony Gonzalez singles. Here's a photo of Tony Gonzalez. He was only 5'9". He is from Cuba. Spent 11 years in the majors. Had a good career. Almost 1,500 hits, 286 career batting average. The guy could hit. That's all there is to it. Jackie Brandt pinch hit for Knowles and bunts Gonzalez to second. So now Gonzalez is on second. We have 1 out. Rojas grounds out to shortstop. Gonzalez moves to third with 2 outs. Now, this game there's no highlights of this game on YouTube. I haven't seen anything written about this particular play with Rojas, but apparently Gonzalez, it might have been a slow roller and Gonzalez was running on contact and made it to third. Callison was intentionally walked, so now there's 2 outs, men on third and first. Phil Linz comes up. Phil Linz was the Phillies' weakest hitter in this really important situation, but he could make contact with the ball. And for you Phillies geeks, I know, or baseball geeks, I know people like this kind of things. It was a Linz versus Lindsay matchup, huh? Okay, so Linz hits a high chopper to third. It bounces off of Davenport's glove, and Gonzalez scores. Remember, Davenport was not their regular third baseman. After the game, Linz says, "I thought he'd catch it. It was, well, a miracle." And it might have been a miracle that it was scored a single since it hit the third baseman's glove, but it was scored a single. So we had a tie score, 5-5. The next batter grounded out. We're into extra innings. So what happens in extra innings? The Phillies bring in Terry Fox, and Fox and Lindsay go inning after inning without allowing any runs. By the way, the Cub Scouts, I think half the Cub Scouts were crying or sleeping. I was wandering the bowels of the stadium just for the heck of it. So I didn't notice any of this stuff, by the way. Frank Lindsay, by the way, is a great pitcher, a relief pitcher. He spent many years with the Giants till 1970. He pitched in 516 games, 816 innings pitched, career ERA of 2.85. Oddly appeared in 22 games with the Phillies in 74, his last season in the MLB. But Fox pitched out of several jams and extra innings. In the 11th, the first 2 batters singled against Fox, so it's first and third, no outs. Phillies infield came in. The next batter hit into a double play, and the runner on third, Holler, inexplicably didn't run. He could have scored. Excuse me. The Inquirer called it a base running boner. Although the San Francisco paper made excuses or tried to explain why Holler didn't go and why Holler might have been thrown out. So who knows if it was a bad play or not. But then then the next batter hit a fly ball. So the inning was over, still tied. It's kind of a miracle when the first 2 batters get a single and nobody scores. In the 13th, McCovey started the 13th with a double, but was thrown out at third on a bunt fielded by Fox. Now, this reminds me of a play in the playoffs with the Phillies. Castellanos, I guess it was the ninth inning. I think it was the second game, maybe, hits a double. The next batter bunts, but the Giants have this wheel play on, and the third baseman comes in and gets the ball and throws to third. The shortstop is covering third. Castellanos is out on a very close play at third. Kind of messed up the Phillies, their chances in that playoff, that's for sure. So that's what that play reminds me of. But Fox made a good play, got McCovey out at third. And then the San Francisco Examiner says about the third out, Gonzalez made the final play of the 13th inning with a sensational running catch of a luge drive to right center. So this is turning into quite a game. So we go to the bottom of the 15th, still tied. The Phillies come up to bat. The Giants replace Lindsay with Joe Gibbons, and White singles. And the Inquirer ran 4 photos on the front of its sports section on the Sunday paper from this 15th inning. So this was the first one. They ran them. They were all down the left-hand side of the page, stacked one on top of each other. It's kind of a neat layout. But again, it's kind of a high contrast photo, kind of low quality photo, but you can kind of see what's going on. It's microfiche, so that's where the photos come from. And you can see this follow through with Bill White. He had this really odd follow through. I mean, it looks like he's a lumberjack or something. He's chopping wood or something. But that's what he looked like. He had a great season for the Phillies. But Bill White singled to lead off the bottom of the 15th. Here we go, Dalrymple bunts White to second. So we have 1 out. And this is a cool photo. I think this is right after he's bunted the ball. You don't see the ball in this photo. Looks like he's dropping the bat to start running. Haller's still in a position to catch the ball. So cool photo, a lot of cool photography. Okay, here we go. So there's 1 out. Gonzalez singles to left. Tony Gonzalez really had a big impact on this game. He really won this game for the Phillies. He singles to left, and Jim Hart, normally the Giants' third baseman, fumbled the ball. This is what the Inquirer wrote. When the ball was hit, White was forced to hesitate to make sure it wouldn't be picked up in the infield. Remember, White was on second base when Gonzalez lashes the ground single to left field. And White stopped, and this is the Inquirer again, and then took off again as the ball went into left field. Hart charged in, and the ball bounced up into his glove, then out again. White was well on his way home to end the 3-hour, 48-minute game. And here's a photo of White stepping on home plate, and there's the disgusted Tom Haller. So, tough way to lose a game, huh? Okay, so the Phillies win in 15 innings. Longest game of the season. Fox went 6 innings for the win, and there's a picture of Terry Fox in his Phillies uniform with a couple of autographs. And the Inquirer called the game a thrilling come-from-behind triumph, and they called Fox a matinee idol. Okay, here's the article where he's called a matinee idol. Frank Dolson in the Sunday Inquirer wrote about the game. Now, here's the thing. I realized when I was researching this game that Terry Fox was still alive. He's like 91 or 92. He lives down in, I think it's Metairie, Louisiana. And I got in touch with a sports writer from down there who knew Fox. And he got me the phone number, and I interviewed Terry Fox for my research for this game. It was very, very exciting. And he vaguely remembered the game. I talked to Terry, and he said he didn't remember it, but I sent him these newspaper clippings. I mailed them to him, and I sent him the box score from Baseball Reference, and he went through it, and then he started having some memories of the game. And he said, I remember the game because it went extra innings, and we were able to control it and win it. That made a big difference. I did what the Phillies got me for. The Giants were trying to get to the championship. I also remember the umpire telling me afterwards that it was the best game he had ever seen. So that's pretty cool. It was fun talking to Terry. So here's some information about Terry Fox and his career. That was his longest appearance with the Phillies, those 6 innings, but not the longest of his career. He kind of specialized in long relief appearances. June 24, 1962, Yankees at Detroit. Remember, they got Fox from Detroit. A 22-inning game, 7 hours. Fox pitched 8 innings, longer than the starter probably, with 8 innings of shutout ball. But the Yanks won in the 22nd off of reliever Phil Regan. And on the next year, June 11th, Fox went 7 1/3 in a 15-inning game against the Red Sox. But Fox ended up giving up 2 home runs in the top of the 15th for the loss for that game. And sadly, on September 17th, 1961, I believe this was when Fox was a rookie, he gave up a home run in the 12th to Roger Maris, his 58th. And you know as well as I do that in the late August into September, every one of those home runs by Roger Maris was a national story as he, forged onward to break Ruth's record from 1927 when Maris hit his 61st on the last game of the season. And that was a 1-0 game that year, by the way. That year, the 61, the Yankees won 109 games. And they won the World Series over the Reds, I believe. I believe it was 4-1. Okay, so Terry Fox was known as a control pitcher. He faced 1,600 batters in his short career, only 124 walks. 1 balk in his entire career, 6 wild pitches, a 2.99 career ERA. He led the Tigers in saves for 3 years. And he says of his pitching style, he said, I wasn't an overpowering pitcher, but I could throw a curveball, a good changeup, and a sinker-type pitch. I don't know that he ever broke 90 miles an hour on his fastball, by the way. He says, I kept the ball low and I threw a lot of strikes. The infielders knew how I pitched and they expected the ball to be hit on the ground. So that's how Terry pitched for 6 or 7 years in the majors, without what they'd call stuff. His stuff was location, keeping it low, and movement. So anyway, after the game, the Phillies were 48-40, still in contention, 6 games back. They would, during the next month or two, they would get as close as 4.5 games back, but that's as close as they got. And Phil split with the Dodgers the next day and won on Monday, 4-0 over Koufax. At that point, Koufax was 16-5. He ended up going 27-9, by the way. And Koufax won his 3rd Major League Cy Young Award in '66, by the way. And but in '66, that would have been the last year that they gave out just one Cy Young Award. Afterwards, they gave out a Cy Young for the National League and the AL. So separate Cy Young Awards for different leagues. But at that time, only one pitcher every year got the Cy Young Award. The winning pitcher on that Monday, by the way, was Larry Jackson. So in a space of 4 days, he had 2 complete game shutouts. Larry Jackson was a beast back then, even at age 35. But the Phils finished 1966, 87-75 in 4th place. Sadly, they did a little better than they did in 65, but still not good enough. I mean, there were a lot of good teams in the league that year. Okay, after the game, the Giants were still up by 1 game because the Pirates also lost. But when the Giants went and dropped 2 to the Pirates in Pittsburgh the next day to fall 1 game out, and the Giants were in first or within 1 game until early September when the Dodgers caught them and won the pennant. The Dodgers won 20-some games out of their final 30 to win the pennant. They really were hot in September, and the Giants were just kind of essentially a 500 team the last month of the season, and they finished in second behind the Dodgers. In fact, the Giants finished in second place from 65 through 69. So, yeah, the Phillies had some problems, but the Giants fans must have been pretty bummed out. They kept getting closer. They were very close, and by the way, in 69, at that point, there were divisions, so they were in second place in the division. I think the Dodgers might have finished in first place every season, right above the Giants. So those Giants fans must really hate those Dodgers. By the way, the Dodgers lost the World Series 4-0 to the Orioles. They lost 2 games, 1-0. It's like one of the lowest scoring World Series ever. And the Orioles had just built up that awesome pitching staff. And oof, even though the Dodgers had, Koufax, they still couldn't beat the Orioles. Oh, ouch. Okay. I mean, the Dodgers were favored by most people to win that World Series, and yet they couldn't even win 1 game. Okay, so here's the final standings for 66. All right. And as you can see, the Phillies 8 games out. Pirates came close. San Francisco 1.5 back. Okay. So what happened to the 66 Wheeze kids? The guys, these older guys that the Phillies had gathered for their 66 roster. What happened to them? Well, it wasn't good. I will tell you that. Bob Buell, as I mentioned before, these are some of his career numbers: 166 wins, 3.55 career ERA, 20 shutouts in his career, 11 complete games. Again, an innings eater. He really was a great pitcher. He pitched in the league for 15 years. Amazing. But the weird thing is he came to spring training in 67. He made it to the team. He was on the team, and when the season started, he pitched 3 innings for the team in 67, and he was released in May. Oh, man. All that work, February, March, down in spring training, trying to get ready, and all you get are 3 innings, and they get rid of you. Oh, well. Sad ending for Bob Buell. Larry Jackson pitched for the Phillies through 68. He had a win-loss record for the Phillies of 41-45. He had 5 shutouts for the Phillies in 66. And he retired after the 68 season with a 14-year career. And here's a screen capture of his stats for the Phillies from 66 through 68. You can see he had a very low ERA all 3 seasons. Started over 30 games. Look at how many innings he pitched. Even when he was 37 years old, he was still kicking butt. 2.77 ERA, 243 innings. Man, he was. I looked at those numbers. I'm like, why did he retire? He could have pitched a couple more years with that kind of productivity. And today, pitchers probably would keep pitching if they could pitch that many innings, because there's so much money in the game. Guys with that kind of record would probably be getting 15, 20 million a year, right? But he had a 14-year career. He appeared in 5 All-Star games. His best year was in 64 when he went 24-11 for the Cubs. Second in Major League Cy Young voting. If they had had separate Cy Youngs in each league that year, he would have gotten one, because a pitcher in the American League won the Major League Cy Young. 194 wins, 3.40 career ERA, over 3,200 innings pitched, 37 shutouts in his career. What a great pitcher. Just not quite a Hall of Fame pitcher. But and this game, the one cool thing about this game is this game and the Phillies, both teams were full of players like this. Players who were great, who had really long, productive careers, but just weren't quite Hall of Famers, despite the 6 Hall of Famers that were on their rosters. Here's another one. Bill White never got into the Hall of Fame, but 22 home runs and 103 RBIs for the Phillies in 66. Played for the Phillies through 68. Traded back to St. Louis in 69. Played sparingly in 69 and retired. He was in 8 All-Star games, 7 Gold Gloves. He was really good with the glove. 1,700 hits in his career. 286 career batting average. A really good player. Got into broadcasting after he retired. He actually worked in Philly for a year or 2. And then he called Yankees games from 71 through 88. And eventually was the president of the National League for 6 years. Bill White is apparently still alive. When I talked to Doug Clemens, he told me that I said, man, I'd love to talk to Bill White, but he said Bill is not doing well and probably couldn't handle an interview, and so was not able to interview Bill White. But a great career and a great player, but not just did not. He was nominated for the Hall of Fame, but he didn't quite make it. Dick Groat, another great player who was on the Phillies for 66. He was an All-American at Duke in baseball and basketball. At 5'11", he was in the NBA in 1953, but then he turned his attention to baseball, and he had a 15-year career, 286 career batting average, over 2,100 hits. National League Rookie of the Year in 52, National League MVP in 60 with a 325 batting average for the Pirates. He played for the Pirates for like 8 or 9 years. He was the MVP runner-up in 63 with the Cardinals when he had another really high batting average. 8 All-Star games. The next season in June, he was purchased from the Phillies by the Giants, and he played 34 games for the Giants and retired. At that point, he was 36 years old. He is in the College Baseball Hall of Fame, the College Basketball Hall of Fame, and the Pirates Hall of Fame, but he's not in Cooperstown. Another guy who came close, but still a great, great athlete and a great career. Harvey Kuhn, same thing, 296 he hit for the Phillies in 66 part-time. He had most of his great seasons were actually in the 50s. He retired he was released after the 66 season and retired. 15-year career, almost 2,100 hits, 303 career batting average. Harvey Kuhn was a base hitting machine. AL Rookie of the Year in 53, 8-time All-Star. 1959, he won the batting title, 353. Oh, man. He led the AL in hits for 4 seasons in the 50s. And he got into coaching after he retired, and he coached the Brewers to the World Series in 82, but they lost to the Cardinals 4-3. And here we have a couple other of these older Wheeze kids. Roger Craig, 14 relief appearances for the Phillies with an ERA over 5. He was released 1 week after the game that we talked about on July 23rd of that season. He played 12 years in the majors. I think somebody else might have signed him. I can't remember. But he then, you might know he coached in the majors for 25 years. He was known as a pitching guru. So Ray Herbert, I haven't really mentioned him much today. They picked him up for the 65 season, and he started a lot of games for the Phillies in 65. He pitched out of the pen in 66, but only 23 games. He was 36 years old. He only appeared in 23 games in 66. Imagine, they had a roster spot for this guy, Ray Herbert, but Mock didn't like him, so Mock hardly ever ran him out there. He took up a roster spot all season. They only have 25 of those, but Mock wouldn't play him. 15-year career, 104 and 107 win-loss, 1,800, almost 1,900 innings pitched, 4.01 ERA. Another one of these, you don't pitch in the major leagues for 15 years unless you're really good. All-Star in 62 with the White Sox. Jackie Brandt. So Jackie Brandt was traded to the Phillies before the 66 season started. I mentioned that before. He hit 250 for the Phillies. In June 9th, 1967, he was purchased from the Phillies by Houston, and he hit 213 with Houston in 67. He was released at the end of the season and retired. He played for a total. Look, he's here with the Phillies. He doesn't look real happy in his photo. It almost looks like he knows what's going to happen. I mean, he played part-time for the Phillies in 66. They got him to play part-time, and he did. His best years were in Baltimore in the early 60s, and when he went to 2 All-Star games, he won a Gold Glove. He had 1,000 hits and over 100 home runs. He coached in the minors for a few years. Then he moved back to Omaha and became a UPS driver. He's apparently very happy as a UPS driver. He's 91 and still alive. I have not attempted to contact Jackie Brandt, but I kind of feel like I probably should give it a try. I'd like to find some player who maybe would have some insight into the 66 Phillies, but I talked to Terry Fox, and I talked to the other guy was the pinch hitter. I can't remember his name offhand, but he neither of them really knew much about the Phillies' strategy for 66. That wasn't their role, right? Their role was just to play. Here's Bob Uecker. Played just 18 games for the Phillies in 67 and, demanded to be traded, and was traded on June 6, 1967 to Atlanta for Gene Oliver, another backup catcher. He played 62 games with Atlanta and was released at the end of the season. He claimed he was traded to Atlanta to catch Phil Niekro's knuckleball. And I don't know if you've ever heard the famous line that he said. Someone asked him later, how do you catch a knuckleball? And he said, you wait till it stops rolling, and then you pick it up and you throw it back to the pitcher. So Uecker always had those great lines. But in 67, he batted only 150 with a dreadful 461 OPS. So he was released and retired after 67. He went on to have a long career as an announcer for the Milwaukee Braves and in TV commercials and on late night TV. He appeared on Johnny Carson many, many times. And he passed away in January. There's Doug Clemens, the guy I spoke with. So in 66, 139 plate appearances, mostly as a pinch hitter, batted .256. He was with the Phillies through 68, but his batting average dropped and his effectiveness dropped. He spent the part of 68 in the minors, and he retired after the 68 season at age 29. Doug went on to have a very good career in business. He was a CEO of a very successful company, and the only thing he told me that he kind of wondered, I said, well, everything turned out okay for you. You had this great career in business after you left at a fairly young age, at least for the Wheeze kids, only 29. But he said, the only thing I wonder about is like in 69 when the Expos came in and they had the expansion draft, if he would have been picked up by the Expos and he would have had a chance to start. That's the one thing that's in the back of his mind. But anyway, Doug's a great guy, really nice guy, and spoke to me about that. Darrell Knowles, what happened with him? Well, he pitched 69 games for the Phillies in 66. He was their workhorse out of the I don't think anybody else even appeared in half those many games out of the Phillies pen. The Phillies pen in 66 was pretty weak. After the season, crazy, they traded him with cash to Washington for Don Locke. But Darrell Knowles ended up pitching till 1980, whereas Don Locke was only with the Phillies. He was a center fielder. He was with the Phillies for 3 years. They felt that their outfield defense was not strong, so they got Don Locke, who was good defensively in the outfield, but only played for another 3 years. Knowles went on won 3 World Series with the A's in the 70s. So anyway, had a long career. Another one of these guys, a great career. Not Hall of Fame, but good. Okay, Phil Linz. In 66, he batted only .200 with a 465 OPS. You don't see numbers like this in the major leagues anymore. He was a utility infielder. A lot of utility infielders had numbers like this. But in the 60s, a utility infielder with those kind of terrible offensive numbers could still make the team. In 67, he batted .211. He was traded in July 67 to the Mets for Chuck Hiller, who was another utility infielder with a similar OPS. In 68, he batted .209 and retired at the end of the season. His best moments were probably in the World Series in 64, where he batted leadoff for the Yankees in all 7 games of the season and went 7 for 31 with 2 home runs. He had a home run off of Bob Gibson in the 9th inning of Game 7, but it didn't really matter because the Cardinals were up like 3 runs, and so the solo home run didn't matter, and the Cards won the 64 World Series 4-3. That's the World Series the Phillies were supposed to win, by the way. Ugh. Okay. Terry Fox, 66 was his last season in the majors and his only one with the Phillies. He didn't do great, a 4.47 ERA. He was in the minors. He was down at AAA in 67 with the San Diego Padres, the Phillies AAA team. and he retired after 67 with accumulating shoulder problems. Terry explained to me that he actually hurt his shoulder while washing his car or something in like 1959. This was before while he was still in the minors, and he hid this shoulder problem his entire career, and he got cortisone shots every couple months just to keep pitching throughout the next 7 years. But it just got too bad after 67, and he had to stop. I guess he was age 30, and he was out of the game. But his career, 29-19, 248 games, 59 saves, 2.99 career ERA. Pretty darn good. I mean, a guy can have an ERA like that, a relief pitcher can make a lot of money in the majors these days. We don't see that too often, but Terry just couldn't continue with that bad shoulder. He never even told the teams he played with that he had a bad shoulder. He never saw their team doctor. He just would sneak out and find some doctor to give him a cortisone shot. Whew, that's rough. Okay, Euchre on the 1966 Phillies. I found this interview with Euchre, and by the way, we're just about done, if you're wondering. But I couldn't find much about people talking about the 66 Phillies, but Euchre was interviewed about it. He was asked about it, and he said, at the time, nobody thought that the trade of Ferguson Jenkins was going to be that big of a deal. Of course, they didn't know Ferguson Jenkins was going to be a Hall of Famer. He was in AAA at the time. But Gene thought the Phillies would contend with the acquisition of Buell and Jackson. Larry had won 20-some games for the Cubs a couple years before that, and with Bunning and Chris Short, we had a pretty good pitching staff. That's true. They did have a decent pitching staff. The starting pitching was very good. The bullpen was weak. And we had good power with Callison, Dick Allen, and Bill White. We had a good club. I still can't figure out why we didn't win the pennant. Well, the Dodgers had a good team, obviously. The Giants had a good team. The Pirates had a good team. The Phillies were in the mix, but they just couldn't do it in 66. Gene Mauch said about the 66 team, this is from that article on September 30th in the Daily News by Bill Conlon. He said, I had the team I wanted. I just couldn't put it on the field at one time. Here he's referring to some injuries. Dick Allen was out for at least a month with an injury, and those minor league players from the relief pitchers that did not make it with the team because of injuries. He's basically referring to injuries here. So 1967, that's when the clearance sale started. As we talked, Kuhn, Herbert, Craig retired in the offseason. Fox was in the minors. Knowles was traded. So all these guys that they had just acquired the year before are now gone. On May 14th in 67, they fell into 7th place. On May 28th, they fell into 8th place. There were 10 teams at the time in the National League because Houston and the Mets had been added in the early 60s. So now they're in 8th place. In 67, it's not going well at all. They decide to get rid of the older guys. These guys they had just acquired. Oh my God. Again, good teams don't do this kind of thing. From May through July, the Phillies got rid of Linz, Buell, Grote, Euchre, and Brandt. 9 of the 12 players acquired for 1966 were gone. Oh, man, whatever. More upheaval. 66 was the last good year for the solid core of Phillies and the last season of good baseball in Philadelphia for some time. In 67, they dropped to 82 and 80, 5th place. Bunning went 17 and 15 in 67, 40 starts, 302 innings, 2.29 ERA, 253 strikeouts. And yet they traded him in December of 67 to the Pirates for Harold Clem, Woody Fryman, Bill Laxton, and Don Money. Now, I guess that's a pretty good haul, Woody for an old pitcher, but boy, 300 innings on Bunning and they trade him. This is John Quinn was the general manager at the time, and he made a lot of moves, not all good. Woody Fryman pitched for the Phillies for a few years, was starting pitcher, did a pretty decent job. Don Money manned third base for a number of years. But by 68, June 68, Mauch was fired. Allen and Rojas were traded in December of 69 to the Cardinals. So this team is being taken apart. The core of the team is pretty much gone by 1970. Callison, Taylor, and Gonzalez were gone shortly thereafter. And by the way, I've asterisk here. Bunning pitched again for the Phillies in 70 and 71. He signed as a free agent. But of course, he was at the end of his career. So late 60s, things were not going good for the Phillies. So here you can see their record. 66, this is the season that we talked mostly about, right? They did a little bit better than 65, 87 wins, but only fourth. And then they started winning fewer and fewer games every season. 68 began a string of 7 losing seasons. Look at this. 72, only 59 wins. 63 and 69 is rough. 389 winning percentage. Not good. So these were the bad years. And John Quinn remained the GM until June 3rd, 1972. And his final trade was on February 25th, 1972. So he didn't make a trade. If you look at this from February through June, what is that, like 4 or 5 months? That must have been killing him not to make a trade. But does anybody know who his final trade was for? Maybe you could raise your hand and you could unmute yourself and tell us. John Quinn's final trade. Anybody know?
Steve Carlton.
Who's that?
Spill.
Oh, Bill, Bill was at this presentation the first time I did it.
Yeah.
So
I knew that before.
did you? Oh, okay. Right. Okay. So I told Bill this back in July. So at any rate, final trade was for Steve Carlton. Now there was a good trade.
Who did he trade?
Who did he trade? Oh, he traded Rick Wise.
Yep.
Rick Wise, who, both were promising young pitchers, but Rick Wise did not have the career that Carlton had. That's for sure. And here's a photo of the Phillies in spring training right before they broke camp to come north. And this is an odd picture. There's John Quinn out there at the right. I think, is that Mauch right there? I'm not sure. But the weird thing is the team really only had about half of these players on the team for most of the season. Many of these guys were gone within a short period of time in 66. Because they were trying, this was before they did a lot of the trades that they did in April and signed a lot of guys. So this was really not the 66 team, but this was their team photo. So that's it. That's the conclusion of this. I ended up writing a games project article on this game. I also wrote an article on my own website. Again, I started out looking into this just to post a little Facebook sentence or two and ended up writing a lot and doing these presentations. So, this has really turned into quite a project for me. So unmute yourselves if you'd like. If you'd like to say anything, let me know, and I will stop sharing. There's the 66 Phillies.
Mike, that was really good. I mean, when we were exchanging emails and I said, well, it's about you finding out whether your memory was correct about Willie hitting a triple and
Yeah.
Finding out when the game was. And you said, oh, no, there's a lot more to it than that. I'm going to do a deep dive on the trades and the game. And you truly did. It was a real well done presentation. Thanks.
Oh, thanks. Thanks a lot. Any other comments or questions? Anybody? Unmute yourself. Feel free to chirp in.
I think Jeff over there, being, I guess, maybe an Orioles fan, he remembers the 66 season, especially the World Series.
I bet he does. Yeah, Jeff, I mentioned the Orioles a few times in there, I suppose you know.
Yeah, well, that was my favorite season since the Orioles won the World Series and the Yankees ended up 10th.
Wow. Yeah. Hey, I mentioned 83. The Orioles won the World Series again against the Phillies. And of course, that trade of Frank Robinson. So
do you know all the other players involved in that trade?
I know there were several. Who else was in there, trade?
Well, actually, Balshin was with the Phillies for three days. Then they traded.
Oh, okay, right.
No, with the Orioles. They traded into the Orioles, and the Orioles traded him 3 days later for Frank Robinson.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
And the other player, Milt Pappas, was the big name in the deal.
Oh, okay.
And then also Dick Simpson went from the Orioles to the Reds. I think they only had Dick Simpson for less than a week, too. I think they just acquired him.
Pretty good trade for the Orioles. So baseball teams should never trade future Hall of Famers. That's what we know.
Oh, that's happened many times.
Unfortunately, they don't know they're going to be future Hall of Famers when they trade them. You know, and for Ferguson Jenkins was not the only future Hall of Famers that the Phillies traded to the Cubs, by the way. There's another one. Does anybody know? Bill, you cannot answer.
Was that in the 60s decade?
No, not in the 60s. Not in the 60s.
Ryne Sandberg.
Ryne Sandberg. Okay. Yes. Another very, very sad story. Sad for the Phillies, that is.
Oh, but Hall of Famers have been traded many times.
Who'd we get? Ivan DeJesus or something. It's like,
They actually traded 2 other Hall of Famers to the Cubs.
They did?
Yeah.
Who?
Grover Cleveland Alexander and Chuck Klein.
Oh, my God. That's right. But Chuck Klein,
he
had his best days with the Phillies, didn't he?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, Ferguson Jenkins, that one really hurt. And so did Ryne Sandberg. They were both minor leaguers when they were traded. I think Ryne Sandberg was thrown in on the Boa trade, right?
Yep.
The Boa DeJesus trade.
Yep.
Oh my God. Hey, Joe Morgan got traded, which was insane. The Babe got traded, for money, because of money concerns. So, yeah, Hall of Famers do get traded. Future Hall of Famers do get traded once in a while. Amazing.
Does anybody else?
It's great. I'm glad to do this.
Yeah, thanks.
So
We appreciate it. Does anybody else have any questions for Mike?
Did anybody go to a game in '66? Anybody here?
Oh, well.
Don't remember.
Don't remember? Okay.
I went to Oriole games, but I don't.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
No.
Before we go, before we wrap this up, Mike, and we have a few minutes here before we run out of time. If you just want to throw a teaser out there for people, you want to take a few minutes and talk about the new stat you've come up with.
Yes, sure. Thanks, Frank. Yeah, myself and a friend have developed this new set of baseball stats called TBG, and there's a lot to it. But basically, we are counting bases. That's what we do with this stat. We count the bases that a player generates, and we count all bases, no matter how they are generated. We're completely agnostic, and I mean they can be generated on errors. Who knows? But we just posed the question: who generates the most offense? And that's what started this stat. And we were thinking about also we were talking about slugging percentage. And I said, well, I don't think slugging percentage counts enough, because slugging percentage just counts the stats, the bases that a player generates from his own hits for himself. So if he hits a grand slam, there's actually 10 bases generated, 10 bases gained through a grand slam, but slugging percentage is only going to count 4 of them. So slugging percentage doesn't count the bases that the batter generates for base runners. So that's the main difference between our stat TBG and slugging percentage. And we also count any bases the player generates as a base runner. So that's another big change between that and, say, slugging percentage. And from that, we also generate, we know the pitcher on each and every hit, each and every play. So we can look at the number of bases a pitcher surrenders. So that gives us a stat called TPS. We divide that by innings pitched. That gives us TPSI. And and we count up the bases from base running separately. So we have a base running stat, which we call TBGR. So we have a website called totalbasesgen.com if you'd like to check that out. And it has some summaries It has like a summary of how we count the bases. We talk about how we believe TBG is better than OPS and the reasons for that, and what OPS doesn't count, or what it counts that maybe it shouldn't count. So, and we have lots of really cool reports out there. Like, for instance, who generated the most bases in a game in baseball history? We have a database going back to 1911. I don't think anybody would guess that person unless they look at that report. You'd be surprised about who that is. Although Shohei has a game last September where I think he gained 33 bases, generated 33 bases. So he's like in 5th or 6th place. Schwarber had 4 home runs earlier this season. I think he gained like 24, 25 bases in that game generated. And by generated, we're talking about the bases that the batter gets for himself and the players who are on base. So if there's a player on first base and the batter hits a single and that runner ends up on third, then we count that play as 3 bases for the batter, right? 2 for the base runner moving up 2 bases, and the single is 1, so that's 3 bases. Whereas slugging percentage is only going to count that as 1 base. So we just feel that this is like certainly a more comprehensive. And we use this slogan, offense equals bases. So any bases that's why we count all bases. Like if somebody gets a walk, that's still part of the offense, right? If somebody steals a base, that's offense. So that's why we count all bases, because any bases gained are part of the offense. That's why offense equals bases. That's our guiding slogan. And so check it out. We also have the most bases gained as a base runner in a single game. Who would do that, right? Who is that? The most bases a pitcher has given up in a single inning. We call that our pitcher meltdown report, and that makes you wonder, why did the managers leave them in? Because they gave up so many bases. Often it's like a starter has a bad first inning and the manager doesn't want to take him out because he doesn't want to burn up his bullpen, right? So he leaves him in that first inning and he really gets hit around, gives up 45 bases or something. Now you may be saying to yourself, now wait a second, it's runs that determine who wins a game. That is true, but there's a very strong statistical correlation between bases and runs. And of course there would be. You can't get runs without bases, right? So again, we just count bases and we say who gains the most bases. And there's one player, by the way, who generated more than 1,000 runs in one season. Would anybody like to guess who that one player is? More than 1,000 runs he generated in one season. Only one player has done that.
How far back are we going?
Back to 1911.
No, I mean when this player played.
Oh, you want a hint?
Yeah, come on.
Come on, Jeff. You ought to know this.
You say 1,000 runs or 1,000 bases?
1,000 bases, the highest TPG in baseball
yeah, I thought
history.
You said runs the first time. Yeah.
No, did I say runs? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Bases.
Wow,
1,000.
Babe Ruth would be too easy to guess.
No, it is Babe Ruth. Of course it's Babe Ruth.
Okay.
Yes. Babe Ruth in 1921 generated over 1,000 bases in one.
Have you proposed this to anybody, and has there been any interest?
Well,
becoming a stat.
Well, I did a presentation at the Babe Ruth Museum a couple weeks ago. That was a lot of fun. Jeff was there. Did a presentation on TBG.
And it was recorded, so you could probably find it on YouTube.
Yeah, the last time I checked, they had not posted it yet, but they did tell me they're going to post it. They said they're going to edit it, so I don't know. I guess they're going to take out my curse words or something. I don't know.
Well, actually, while we were talking here, I was searching for it on there, and I didn't find that one, but I found one that says mythical Willie Mays triple, a matinee hero.
Oh, now that is probably on the the Phillies SABR chapter.
Well, it's on the main SABR YouTube page.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that was out there. I have to check. That's interesting. Okay.
Yeah, it says 3 months ago. It says Philly/SABR.
All right.
It's also on the main one.
Okay. I thought it was only on the Philly SABR YouTube channel. I guess it's on the main one. That's cool. Yeah. Well, but so this is a big project. This friend and I, neighbor down the street, who used to be a SABR member, but for some reason he's no longer. His name is Tom Lewis, This is like a software project that we've been involved in for 3 years. So we get data down, we download data from RetroSheet, which is a wonderful, wonderful organization, which is making baseball play data available to the general public for free. By the way, they're looking for volunteers if anybody wants to help them out to code games like in the 1890s and stuff. They need help. And the Negro League games, they want to add more to their databases. So that's how we were able to do this. So it's a really cool project. It's a lot of work, but we discovered some really interesting and fun historical performances, you know.
Well, before we run out of time, I think we have about 5 minutes left. So I just want to thank you again.
Sure.
Yeah.
We started out with 14 participants, and at the end there was 12. So you held everybody's interest.
That's good. Yeah, not bad.
And I want to thank you very much for offering to do this. And I want to thank everybody for attending tonight. And if there's any last minute questions before we get thrown off, anybody have any last question for Mike?
No, it's-
If not, Mike, thank you very much.
Yes, thank
Uh,
you.
Yeah,
tell
thanks,
everybody
Frank.
Good night, and maybe we'll get you to do the presentation on your new stat.
Yeah, yeah. I'm open to that for sure.
Okay.
Thanks,
Good night.
everybody. Good seeing you.
Hey,
Thanks, everyone.
yeah,
Bye-bye.
bye.
Take care.